It's 7:45 p.m. in Stevenson, Alabama, and we've just concluded our second day trackside along CSX's Chattanooga Subdivision with this southbound I-025 intermodal featuring the Spirit of Our Armed Forces on the point. This would be the last train for our second day, and even pushing the envelope here with how late we stayed for this one, considering that we were an hour behind in a different time zone, and we wanted to get up crazy early the next day as the weather was looking good. So we'd watch the top priority container train glide through Stevenson, but once it got by, we'd make the 2.5-hour drive back to the house as we'd have to get everything prepped for the next morning, clothes and all, as the weather would come to fruition and the prominent question would finally be answered. February 19th, 6:25 a.m., northbound on Interstate 75 somewhere around Resaca, Georgia. A pretty big cold front had begun to move in over the area the night before, bringing a good bit of moisture with it, and it would just so happen to get cold enough that that moisture and precipitation would be able to turn to snow. However, due to the cold front having moved in overnight, it meant that all of the precipitation would occur in the very early morning, so we were up and out of the house right about 5:30, putting us in Dalton around 6:30, by which point the snow was now in full swing. Though the spot that we had chosen beforehand to stake out this potentially snowy morning was Tunnel Hill, so we still had a bit of a ways to go. Thankfully, however, the snow that was just enough to accumulate on the ground wasn't so much that it caused the roads to become icy, so we just took it easy between Dalton and Tunnel Hill, making it there in due time, leaving us then to be able to appreciate the winter wonderland that surrounded us.
Going for you. Guys, it's snowing again. And now we're in Tunnel Hill. That's... Bro, this is so cool. And we got a E301 coming.
We didn't even know about it until we were like in Adairsville.
Mm-hmm. Hell yeah. We're back in the weather ever.
The E301 that was coming our way that we just mentioned a bit about is a northbound empty coal train returning from the Plant Bowen facility in Stylesboro, Georgia. This is another iteration of one of the empty coal trains that we missed the head end of in Ringgold in my last video. So, unbeknownst to us, we ended up leapfrogging that train between Cartersville and here, meaning that within another 15 minutes or so, the train would catch up. So on snowy deck now, returning to Evansville, Indiana, is train E301. However, the return towards Evansville, Indiana would be quite delayed here at Tunnel Hill. As you may notice, they are on the Tunnel Hill siding, which is the track in the foreground. This train would be going into the siding here to meet two opposing southbound trains that would take a couple hours between each other to get here. The unfortunate reasoning behind this is that the only other siding between here and Chattanooga is Graysville, and it's only about 6,000 feet long, and with this coal train running about 6,500 feet this morning, it was just too short for this train to fit. And these other two trains were already on their way out of Waxahachie with fresh crews, so these guys would just have to sit on the sidelines for a while until these others got by. But not to worry for our empty train, Tunnel Hill is the longest siding on the W&A sub at 11,300 feet in length. So plenty of room for these guys to sit for a while, blocking no crossings. We eventually got word that our first opposing southbound was approaching Ringgold, so they'd be here pretty shortly. But in the meantime, I'd take a few minutes to walk around and get some miscellaneous photography of the snow-covered southern scenes here. Tunnel Hill is kind of in that southern part of the United States that might see snow one winter and not see any the next. Quite frankly, it's a miracle that we even got snow here this morning. The only reason it snowed here is because the air happened to get cold enough that the inevitable precipitation that came with the cold front was able to turn to snow. But even then, it was only just cold enough for that at about 32 degrees. And it also meant that within the next few hours, by the time it warmed up by only a few degrees, all of this snow would very quickly begin to dissipate. It would all be gone by lunchtime. And we were pretty much right on the edge of where it snowed too. Had we been only a few towns south of here this morning, and we would have seen 0 snow today, only some very cold rain. But finally, coming through the freezing rain was our first opposing southbound train. Another opposing coal train, this one also headed to Stylesboro. Southbound C306 would meet the E301 at the north end of the siding, with a varying pair of CSX rebuilt locomotives leading the charge. Evidently, these guys had run into engine trouble over in Widow's Creek the night before, meaning that they were delayed until this morning, which was a happy accident now seeing this coal train through the snow, meeting an opposing coal train coming from the exact power plant these guys were going to. Though seeing a meet between 2 opposing Stylesboro trains isn't exactly uncommon here. As I mentioned before, Stylesboro is a fairly busy power plant, receiving coal trains once every couple days or better. The Western and Atlantic Subdivision in and of itself is a pretty busy coal route, not just for Stylesboro, but other opposing power plants in South Carolina and points around. But I will say, regardless, that this is one of the most unique power sets that I've seen on a coal train before, so that was pretty neat. Another nearly 2 hours go by before our final opposing train, and by this point a good bit of the snow is beginning to fade away. But there's still a good bit of it left on the ground as southbound M281 comes into town with another EMD leader on the point. Running with a solid train of auto racks this morning, M281 is Louisville, Kentucky to Case, South Carolina, pretty much all auto racks. Although this train and its counterpart M280 had only just been reinstated as of February 15th, just a few days before our trip up here. But as of March 18th of this year, they have both since been abolished again, so they were only reinstated for about a month, in which time we managed to catch one here in the snow at Tunnel Hill. This train will work Smyrna, Tennessee, Lawrenceville, Georgia, Greenwood, and Newberry, South Carolina on its way down. Though as we follow the train a bit to the east, I'll reiterate once again how Tunnel Hill got its name, now with the tunnel's hill being covered in a fresh layer of snow. The smaller, non-railroad tunnel visible on the right was the original tunnel built by the Western and Atlantic Railroad in 1850. That would carry trains through this hill until the early 1920s, when American trains began getting larger and wider. So a larger bore would have to be constructed, the second one on the left completed in 1928. Now large enough to accommodate double-stack containers and tri-level auto racks, this second tunnel is the bore that CSX still uses today with their W&A sub, and is quite literally the reason that this tiny southern town is named Tunnel Hill. blink and you might miss it. Coming north there was train L806, a local job having originated out of Waxahachie, Tennessee, having worked the W&A sub down to Dalton, Georgia, now making their return trip to Waxahachie. Now that the local job was moving and out of the way, a couple other northbound trains would follow in tandem, with the first one being a northbound ethanol unit train with a unique leader. Coming north, now empty, was train B646. Ethanol empties from the facilities in Lawrenceville, Georgia, back to the Canadian Pacific Kansas City Railroad interchange in Bensenville, Illinois. Today's iteration would happen to have the CSXT 1851, the Nashville, Chattanooga, and St. Louis heritage locomotive in the lead. Unique also about this unit train was that it wasn't quite a unit train. On the back of the empty tank car block was a rather large cut of empty auto racks. Not exactly uncommon for CSX to pull moves like this, but not always seen every day. I believe they were going to drop these empty racks in the yard at Waxahachie once they made it to Chattanooga. Now to conclude the northbound parade and our snowy morning in Tunnel Hill as a whole would be a northbound double stack train emerging from the hill. As we approach the middle of the day, the heat comes up and the snow begins to all fall away. We see it's our old friend I-142, northbound double stack traffic from Jacksonville to North Baltimore, Ohio. And turning out to be the latest iteration of an I-142 that we'd catch on this trip. This train's usually through this territory well before sunrise. But any kind of double stack or intermodal traffic in daylight on the W&A is always a welcome sight. I-142 would pretty much be the end of all traffic in Tunnel Hill for a good few hours, and by the time anything else came up on the radar to pass through here on CSX, all of the snow would be gone. So we tied the bag there and moved on for points elsewhere. And since the focus of this video was all about the snow in Tunnel Hill, I'm not going to include everything else from that day, but like the video prior, I will include the honorable mentions from the latter part of today. The honorable mentions this time around are going to be 3 coal trains that we caught across varying railroads, as we know that coal is a dying commodity, and pretty soon we may not be able to see trains like these anymore. And one of those would come our way fairly shortly after leaving Tunnel Hill. We made our way over to a northern suburb of Dalton called Waring, where the Norfolk Southern's Atlanta North District passes through. And as you can tell now already, there's no sign that the snow was ever here, and the gloomy weather that brought the precipitation and the cold front would stick around throughout the rest of the day. After capturing the southbound NS 204, southbound train 732 would follow right behind. Train 732 is coal loads off of BNSF's giant Powder River Basin way out west, interchanged to Norfolk Southern in Memphis, Tennessee, who then transport it to Plant Schrerer in Juliet, Georgia. Talk about a tongue twister. Plant Schrerer is probably the busiest power plant in Georgia, even above Stylesboro. Train 732, while in the as-needed category, is an almost daily running train. 732 and its empty counterpart 733 are often seen in this territory with the BNSF power that often comes through the interchange at Memphis. With 2 locomotives on the front and 2 on the rear, this Transcon coal train will finally complete its multi-day journey later this afternoon. After running out to get a bite to eat with a rather slow day to follow, we decided to make our way up towards Chattanooga again, as we wanted to try and get a few more trains on the hilly and curvy section just outside Waxahachie, and maybe a few more shots over on Nickajack Lake if that came to fruition. Though we ultimately wouldn't make it that far, as we heard of a C904 coming across Nickajack Lake as we came through Wauhatchie. So we'd then wind our way westward, stopping first for a photo of the train crossing the Running Water Creek trestle that spans the Running Water Creek and Interstate 24. After capturing that photo, we'd quickly work our way back east to the intermediate signals at Whiteside. Here I'd be able to get another photo of the train with my drone and also set up the video camera for the train passing by. But first off, coming up behind us would be local job L843, originating out of Wauhatchie and running west down the Chattanooga Sub to work various customers up to Tyner, Tennessee, to which they'll return to Wauhatchie later tonight with whatever cars they pick up. Our two opposing trains would quite literally meet right around the corner, so pretty soon in a couple minutes, here came southbound C904. Loaded coal from Evansville, Indiana to Pennyroyal, South Carolina, and I'm not exactly sure about the accuracy on that destination, but I know it's somewhere in South Carolina. I've seen it change a couple times. But the routing on this one has pretty much never changed. C904 has almost always been a pretty consistent customer here on the W&A and Chattanooga Subdivisions, also easily recognized by the stainless steel SCWX coal hoppers that it runs with. Setting up on the sidelines here at Whiteside gives us another small look into what mountain railroading is really like, albeit maybe a watered down example, as this isn't the greatest example out there. But C904 would certainly be on their knees trying to get back up to speed after slowing down for the meet with the L843. They'd managed to get their nearly 20,000 ton train rolling again as they'd come to a stop again shortly down at Wauhatchie for a crew change. They'd be next in line as, unbeknownst to us, a second coal train had come through this territory only about an hour before this one, symboled C319. Though as we'd spend the next couple hours awaiting a train or two on Nickajack Lake without much luck, we'd eventually find our way back down onto the W&A after the sun had gone down. Stopping for our last couple trains of the whole trip down in our familiar town Adairsville, Georgia. Known by us for having one of the funniest sounding crossing bells on this entire subdivision. And mind you, the gloomy weather of this morning had stuck around all day, with the cold front still moving in a bit, so there was a good bit of breeze moving through Adairsville tonight in the 37-degree air that would accompany us for our last two trains of the trip. Rolling south now, looking almost identical to the C904 we just got up there at Whiteside, is southbound C319, the coal train that we had missed by about an hour up there at Whiteside, now having obtained a new crew and having made it all the way down the W&A to right here to Adairsville. These guys are headed south for Cross, South Carolina, a different destination than C904, while using a similar looking train set of cars. But do not be mistaken, this is a totally different train. Perhaps ironic, though, that the C904 we did see at Whiteside ended up getting a crew out of Wauhatchie only 30 minutes behind this train, so they were running down the W&A back to back now. And now for one final familiar face, C904, the same one we got up there in Tennessee, now making their southward run through Adairsville, Georgia, right at 10 p.m. C904 passing here would not only conclude this video, but it would also conclude our trip as a whole. I'd like to once again give a huge thanks to my buddy Andrew for the hospitality and bits of therapy over these last few days, chasing trains all over this crazy terrain. And as for you viewers, I hope it was somewhat enjoyable for y'all to see me jump around the list a little bit with these trains we saw, and to see a bunch of stuff in the snow at Tunnel Hill. Which isn't always a yearly occurrence, but something tells me that I at least will be back up in this territory for sure next year. But at least with all that we've captured within these last few days, we'll conclude the Georgian videos here. So I appreciate y'all taking the time to watch these two, and hopefully from somewhere back home is where I'll be greeting y'all next. From Adairsville, Georgia, this is Kotabeaner, and I'll see you next time down on the Sunshine State Rails.